Orcas, also known as killer whales, are highly intelligent, social marine mammals and the largest member of the dolphin family. Even though laws have changed about cetacean captivity, there are still killer whales held in aquariums around the world, and some continue to perform for the customers that purchase tickets. My name is Karen. This is me, just before I left my hometown of Thunder Bay, Ontario, Canada, and made a 3,200-kilometer journey across the country to go out west to Vancouver, British Columbia, to be an artist. When I finally arrived on the West Coast, one of the first things I wanted to do was see the ocean. So I did, and I immediately fell in love. Second was to see orcas, so my friends thought it would be a good idea for us to visit one of Vancouver's biggest attractions, the Vancouver Aquarium. In 1995, I visited the aquarium. There were many animals kept there, as well as several orcas for educational purposes. I remember sitting on a bench with others to watch the orca show. They were in these small pools. One orca was ill and not coming up to the surface much. The other's dorsal fin was slouched over. The trainers explained these things away as being fine and normal, but I left sickened and feeling something was wrong. Shortly after visiting the aquarium, I jumped on a ferry to Victoria, the capital city of British Columbia, located on the southern end of Vancouver Island. I immediately fell in love with this area. So much beauty, with gorgeous landscapes, beaches, healthy cafes, and lovely people. I rented an apartment straight away and began exploring. First stop, Oak Bay Marina, to see the seals. How incredible that sounded to me. I'd never seen a seal in real life before. So off I went. The Oak Bay Marina is a lovely place. All you have to do is walk down the docks and the seals will pop right out of the water, begging for fish. I stopped for a while and chatted with a woman who asked me if I knew why the seals hung out there still. Apparently, this was the site of Sealand of the Pacific. They had orcas performing there many years ago. I had no idea, and so I started researching it. Sealand of the Pacific was a public aquarium in Oak Bay in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. It opened in 1969 and stayed open through to 1992. It housed a number of orcas, Haida 2, who was pregnant, Nootka 4, and Tilikum. In 1991, they were involved in an incident in which 21-year-old marine biology student and part-time trainer Kelty Byrne lost her life. Kelty accidentally slipped in the water and the orcas repeatedly dragged her under until she drowned. After this incident, the orcas were sold to SeaWorld and Sealand was closed down. Orcas chosen for captivity are captured by stalking and herding them into a netted area using deafening explosions. Some of them are slaughtered, while others, the optimal ones, are harvested for aquariums. Since they are highly social, family-oriented, intelligent beings, this is an incredibly stressful process for them. Tilikum, who went to SeaWorld Orlando, continued to perform and went on to take the lives of several more people. Even so, he stayed there performing and held in isolation until his death in 2017. His story sparked much publicity and he was featured in the documentary Blackfish in 2013, directed by Gabriella Cowperthwaite. I was recently fortunate to be able to speak with two of his former trainers, also featured in the film, Samantha Berg and Jeffrey Venture.
Each of you tell us a little bit about working at SeaWorld and how it evolved into more of a fight to protect marine animals?
Well, it's a longer conversation, but the short part of the story for me is that I was there for 3.5 years, and it really wasn't until years later that I started thinking about my experience at SeaWorld and realized a lot of what I learned there and what I thought was true about killer whales, and basically everything that they taught me was a complete lie. So it was right after John Branchell was killed in February of 2010. That's what made me reevaluate my whole experience at SeaWorld. And the more that came out from SeaWorld corporate, the more that was in the media and what they were saying about her death, I just realized that they were lying. And it had made me rethink my whole experience there, and that's what started me down that road. But honestly, what got me involved was that Jeff and John Jett, who's another former SeaWorld trainer, they were interviewed by Tim Zimmerman for a story called Killer in the Pool in Outside Magazine, and I read that, and I got back in touch with them and started talking to them about their experience and what they've been discussing for years, and it kind of evolved from there. And also Carol Ray, who's not here today, but she's another former trainer who got involved. So the four of us started talking together, and I think it evolved from there.
Yeah, that's true. And so for me, I just made some observations. I was there longer than Sam, so I had a chance to work with killer whales on 2 occasions. I'm fond of saying that when you get hired as an animal trainer, it's kind of like you're kind of euphoric because it's a very hard job to get. And so the first year or two goes by, and you're just happy to be there. When I came back to Shamu Stadium in 1994, I began to just see whales dying, broken teeth, collapsed dorsal fins, and we're making these observations in real time with John Jett, and we became vocal about it while we were still there. And fast forward to 99 when David Duke was killed. And John called me. I was visiting someone in New York at the time, and he's like, "What are we going to do about this?" And unfortunately, Daniel Dukes was killed without any witnesses, and so SeaWorld was able to basically say whatever they wanted to say, and that's what they did. They said that he died of hypothermia, but his autopsy report differs from that. Tillicum thrashed him pretty good. When Don was killed on 24 February 2010, there were plenty of witnesses. SeaWorld used their operations staff to kind of get those people out of the stadium, and then had, I think, 41 out of the 43 people that provided testimony were all SeaWorld employees, mostly animal trainers, who were shaped and conditioned to say the proper response. And so those interviews are still available at Tim Zimmerman website, and I've got some of them on Scribd, and so it's pretty amazing what they did. There's also some audio interviews, I think on YouTube, that David Kirby posted, like with Laura Cervic, for example, that talks about that day, what happened. And so they began shaping the interview immediately, and both myself and JJ, he made that same phone call to me this time. And as it happened, I was already involved in medicine. I was a resident at the time in New Orleans. I got a call from the production manager of Anderson Cooper 360, and called into the show that night. And then that got the attention of CNN. So Wolf Blitzer called me a couple days later, and then the CBS Morning Show called me 3 days later, and then Tim Zimmerman, whom Sam mentioned, reached out to me, just found me through LSU PM&R residency program, just emailed me right through the front door, and then began the piece that Sam talked about, the Killer in the Pool piece, and that's what Gabriella Calverthwaite read. And so by the time that story was produced, Sam, Carol, and I were talking pretty much every day, almost like multiple times a day, whether it was a text message or a voice call or an email. And then eventually we were getting interviewed a lot. And then that's kind of what, in 2011, Gabriella reached out to Tim to try to get some ex-trainers together to put the movie Blackfish together. I think 60 Minutes also reached out to Tim. And so we started saying, why don't we get together in Friday Harbor and see each other face to face, because we had all worked together at one point. And that's kind of what began our SuperPod events, is us getting together. And it attracted a documentary film team as well as David Kirby to collect interviews for Death at SeaWorld. And so ever since then, we've, it's like nothing. We are great friends, and these friendships continue to this day.
Some of these companies that are capturing these animals are trying to promote them as educational and research tools now. How do you guys feel about that?
There was when the Marine Mammal Protection Act came out and was in 1972, the law was basically set up so that supposedly marine mammal institutions were holding the animals on behalf of the public. So there started to be legislation coming down the pike saying that in order for SeaWorld to have their animals, that they had to incorporate some sort of an educational component to what they were teaching the public. So that was like their ability to keep the animals in captivity was contingent on them being able to educate the public. And I think the quote was in 1988, and so this is like years after the marine mammal.
Yovanovitch, right?
Yeah.
Yovanovitch owns SeaWorld.
So they were a publishing company actually that owned SeaWorld for a while. But they actually, the CEO is quoted saying, "We're not an educational company, we are an entertainment company." So even in 1988, you know, with 16 years after the Marine Mammal Protection Act, they were still claiming that we're doing entertainment, we're making money off of these animals, and they were complaining that they had to do education. So that's back in 1988. But what SeaWorld does consistently, and all of the other any institute, even a roadside show that's keeping marine mammals, they're all kind of going off of SeaWorld's model. And what they say is that the animals are, quote, ambassadors for the animals in the wild, and that and you probably know who Jack Hanna is. Have you seen him before? Yeah. So he likes to use that term, and the idea is that somehow that because these animals are accessible to the public and they can see them in captivity, that people are learning about them. If they didn't see them in captivity, they wouldn't love them, they wouldn't care about them, they wouldn't care about the oceans. And all the studies on that is, excuse the words, but bullshit. that is not true. And if you look at what Dr. Naomi Rose likes to use the example of dinosaurs. So, like, what kid has ever seen a dinosaur? And how many kids are completely fascinated and love dinosaurs and know more about dinosaurs than most adults? And so it's not, and there's more information you can get with a 2-minute search on the internet, not even a 5-minute search. 2 minutes on the internet, you can learn more about killer whales than spending an entire day at SeaWorld, and spending days at SeaWorld. So that argument sounds nice. I think that somehow they're ambassadors and that these whales are teaching us. But if you think about the suffering that the animals go through in captivity, I would say there's no amount of suffering that justifies what they. It's very human centric to speak that way, to say somehow, well, it would, if you put it in another way, and he said, well, we're going to keep these humans in cages, we're going to keep this particular population of humans in cages so other humans can learn about them. We know that's wrong. These animals are so intelligent that really the same thing applies. So they're suffering, they're being tortured in captivity, so there's nothing good that comes out of it, of their suffering. And again, it's just spin.
So to tie some ideas together, the Marine Mammal Protection Act compelled SeaWorld to have to say that they're creating an educational product. And so SeaWorld has been engaged in a 50-plus year misinformation campaign that continues to this day. And they're being sued in federal court on the 18th of February of this year for lies made by the company and Jim Atchison regarding the impacts that Blackfish was having on them. I mean, this guy took the Fifth Amendment. Fred Jacobs, the former communications vice president, has come out and said, yeah, I was instructed to lie. So SeaWorld has this long history of lying, which continues to this very day. And they are, quote unquote, the leaders of the industry. So, they're heavily involved with IMATA. SeaWorld basically runs IMATA. And IMATA is involved in the
National Marine Animal Trainers Association. Just wanted to give her that acronym. Yeah.
Right. So IMATA is actually in Taiji with trainers selecting the dolphins that are lucky enough to not get slaughtered by the fishermen at Taiji, Japan. So SeaWorld is directly involved with the collection and capture and killing of dolphins in Taiji, because they basically run IMATA, but they won't distance themselves from IMATA, yet they claim that they have no relationship with Taiji. Samantha and I work directly with Taiji farmed animals, including Suki, Yaki, Terry, and Hana, back in the early 90s at Whale and Dolphin Stadium. Of course, they're all dead now, but we've got the receipts for those whales. And so this misinformation campaign continues. I'm really kind of flabbergasted at this point how anyone can believe what they're putting out. And this just goes to a bigger problem of corporations controlling the media. So, I remember being at SeaWorld when a news team would come in, and I couldn't believe the difference between the reality of what I just witnessed and what was being perpetuated on the news show that night. So that idea still continues, and SeaWorld is also infiltrating the scientific literature. When John Jett and I published a paper on orca survival in 2017, SeaWorld first sent a mole to Superpod 3 and then produced their own paper that was cherry-picked data to combat that. And you see it all the time with corporations.
Yeah, a couple of things on that. One was that in terms of the dry fisheries, what Jeff is saying about how SeaWorld tries to distance themselves from the dry fisheries, and they say, oh, we're saving animals from the dry fishery. We're actually rescuing some of the animals so they don't get killed and turned into food. But the truth is, and I can't remember the date, you'd have to go back and look it up, but the dry fisheries were ending, and SeaWorld's responsible for restarting them because it was a source of animals from them. And if you look, basically SeaWorld will launder animals through other facilities and say, oh, this animal didn't come directly from the dry fishery. It came from another institution. And a good example of that is Gudrun, the whale that Jeff and I both worked with. And she actually died a horrible death in giving birth. She basically had to have the fetus had to be ripped out of her uterus, and she perished. And and actually her daughter Taima died the same way. So that's you can look that up on the internet, and there's some pretty awful stories about that. But when they capture animals from the wild and they launder them through other facilities, and they claim that these animals are therefore, we're making a breeding loan, we're making a trade from another facility. So that's one thing that they do. And again, because they had the microphone for so long and nobody was contesting them, the media would just believe them. And then the other piece I'd like to talk about is scientific research. I came out of a research institute as an undergrad, and I thought I was going to, as SeaWorld build itself the world's premier institution for marine mammal research, study, and display. Still in my head. And but the truth is that I saw no actual research going on there. The only research that they were doing was how to keep the animals alive longer so they could make more money off of them. And after I left, they were doing research into how to breed the animals, and they were breeding them at a level that would never occur in the wild. So they're basically trying to produce more animals as fast as they possibly could. And where killer whales would normally have one baby maybe every 5 to 7 years, they were trying to have them have babies every 2 to 3 years. So, which is pretty, and they were getting them pregnant even at a younger age than what's normal in the wild. So, is a little baby killer whale baby making factory is what was going on there. And again, you can do some research on that and hear trainers talking about what the artificial insemination process is like for the animals, and it's pretty horrific.
Do you guys feel that any of the animals could have been released back into the wild after captivity at all, or no?
I believe that there's two animals that were potential candidates. One of them was Morgan, but now Morgan has devastated her teeth, just like other killer whales in captivity do. So I no longer believe she's a good candidate for complete release. Lolita in the Miami Seaquarium is also a candidate. Her teeth are in relatively good shape, and I believe the reason for that is that she lives in solitude. So she does not engage in as much jaw popping and self-injury as behaviors because of the type of facility she's in. I mean, she's basically in what looks like an outdoor tub, where and with a little screen fence. The whales at SeaWorld have segregation gates that are thick steel bars, and they're horizontal. And when they jaw pop at each other, sometimes they get a little too aggressive and they'll chomp down on those bars, and that's how they bust out their teeth. I've said this before in public interviews that if SeaWorld would simply make one engineering adjustment to those gates and put in vertical bars instead of horizontal bars, I think they'd see a lot less teeth damage. But SeaWorld doesn't like to take advice from disgruntled employees, so to speak. So I don't. That's probably a $500,000 retrofit. You know what I mean?
And on that line of whether animals can return to the wild, I think it's really tricky. As Jeff said, Lolita, her mom's still alive in the wild. So she's one of the southern residents. So Ocean Sun, I think is Lolita's name, Lolita's mom's name. So she still could go back. A lot of people are pushing for Corky to go back. She's a northern resident. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah, SeaWorld of California. Her teeth are devastated, and I doubt that she's not a good candidate. But that doesn't mean that any of those whales couldn't survive in more of like a ocean pen kind of situation where they have way more space and they don't have to perform for their food. They could have a much better life. And right now there's the Whale Sanctuary Project. Dr. Lori Marino is heading that, and that's a good place to go to get more information. They're currently looking for a good site. Some of these animals can be retired. And I really do think that could be monetized as well. Of course, the argument from the corporation is how are we going to pay for that if the big fish isn't jumping out of the water? But plenty of people would come to see these animals in a more natural setting. That I don't think but of course, there's a lot of funding and there's a lot of logistics that are involved with dolphins. They're smaller animals and they can be in a warmer environment where the kinds of weather issues that you deal with in more northern climate. It doesn't play in. So it is a little bit more expensive and it's a little bit difficult. Dr. Ingrid Visser is another person to look up. She's got a mock-up of what a potential sanctuary as well as a rehab facility would look at. And I think she's got that on her site, ORCA Research Trust. You can go there and see more about that as well.
There's a guy by the name of Brad Ant, who's a college student, putting forth a proposal for his, I don't know if it's his dissertation or whatever, Brad Ant, A-N-T-H-E. He's created the entire proposal that he'd like to see SeaWorld put forth. He's proposing that SeaWorld actually operates the sea sanctuary, and charge people fees to see the facility. There's no shows, but he's actually gone all the way to the details of designing wetsuits for these people and drawing out the entire facility. And look up Brad online, put Brad and killer whale sanctuary. And I'm hoping Brad returns to Superpod 7.
Thank you guys so much for connecting with us and sharing your voices. You guys are both amazing. I'm so glad that you had the courage to speak up and keep going with it.
Yeah, thanks for actually the others. It's always good to see Sam too. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
In 2019, I had a vegan cafe, and by chance, I got the opportunity to cook for Sea Shepherd, the crew of the Martin Sheen, a life-changing moment for me and my family. Many of them have become good friends, and they helped me direct my activism more towards our oceans, and I've learned a lot. I was fortunate once again to chat with a Sea Shepherd onshore crew member for the Victoria chapter. Here is my interview with Kat Henn.
What obstacles do orcas face today?
Toxins from the pollution that are accumulating in all their fat, and when they're starving, as the southern residents are, they start using that fat as energy, so the toxins are more in their bloodstream and making them weaker and harming their health. So that's a huge one. Noise from the boats. I think it interferes with the echolocation and their search for food, their communication with their pod. There's quite a bit of noise out there.
Right.
The salmon farms and the dams are huge obstacles. As you know, the salmon farms with the PRV virus that's spreading to the native salmon,
right.
Of which the Chinook is the southern residents' preferred food.
Right.
So that and the dams in Washington State that are preventing the salmon from migrating.
Right.
And I think another big one is too few breeding males in the southern resident population. I think it was studied not long ago, and 2 males populated a great deal of the population, J1 and L41. J1's died in 2010, L41 is missing now, and they presume dead, and a lot of inbreeding going on. So I think those are some of the biggest things.
Right, yeah. How many orcas exist in the present time?
The southern residents have 72 right now, plus Tokate, if you want to count her. She is from Alpod and is in Miami Aquarium, as you know.
Yeah.
So that would make 73. The northern residents are just over 300, and the transients are right around 400, maybe more.
Tell us about how they communicate and interact with each other.
By echolocation, the squeals and the clicks, and each pod has a different dialect, kind of like if you go to the U.S., the southern states have the southern accent, and the northern states don't. So it's kind of the same in the whales, but then also the transients and the residents don't communicate with each other. They have their own languages.
What is your stance on captivity and seaquariums?
I think we have no right to keep such a sentient, beautiful being in captivity. I mean, they're claiming now it's for education purposes, and you're not learning anything about a whale in the wild in what's essentially a bathtub, which is the complete opposite of what they need. They swim for hundreds of miles a day in nice, cool oceans, and they need that. They're not getting that in what's essentially a bathtub, so I think it's cruelty.
Yeah, I agree.
Over the years, many orcas have been horrifically ripped from their families and taken away from their natural habitats, forced to live in small concrete, unnatural tanks, and forced to perform circus tricks for fish, all for profit, until they die. It's hard not to feel sad or angry about that. But fortunately, there are amazing activists who have spoken out about these atrocities and educated people. There have been many of these places shut down due to low ticket sales and laws passed. Many whales are still stuck in these facilities and forced to perform as their captors refuse to release them into the wild. And some are there because their teeth and mental stability have been so damaged they would have a tough time surviving in the wild. This brings me to my final interview and the reason I made this film. My next interview is with founder of the Whale Sanctuary Project, Lori Marino.
Tell us about the Whale Sanctuary Project and why you started it.
I started the Whale Sanctuary Project in 2015 because I realized that there's really only one solution to the problem of dolphins and whales being in concrete tanks, and that is sanctuary. Most of them, if not all, cannot simply just go back into the ocean. They don't know how to survive. So the best thing we can do for them is to give them a home in the ocean where they actually can be cared for. So that's what the sanctuary is. And in 2016, we incorporated as the Whale Sanctuary Project.
Tell us a bit about the new location that you've chosen now, and how many animals will you be taking care of there?
Well, in February, we announced, in February, we announced the site that we are pursuing. It's in Nova Scotia on the eastern shore, and it's called Port Hilford.
Okay.
And it's a big, beautiful, expansive bay about 2 hours north of Halifax. And that's where we're going to pursue permitting for the site. The site itself will be at least 100 acres, and it will allow us to house, maybe 8 beluga whales, maybe more. We could expand to more, and 2 or 3 orcas as well. So, it's such a large space, and we have the space to accommodate at least that many.
Will you be having programs happening there, and will the public be able to interact in some way with it? I know you want the orcas, the idea is to not have them performing and not have them bothered, but will you be doing that kind of thing?
Well, the public won't be able to interact with the whales and get close to them. They will, however, be able to see them from a distance. We'll have perhaps a viewing point set up or a trail that they can see, maybe using scopes, see the whales. We'll also have an interpretive center, and the interpretive center will have a live feed of the whales coming in all time. So people will be able to see how the whales are acting, how they're doing, get to know them through those kinds of technologies in the interpretive center, and then anywhere else, classrooms, museums.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
I hopefully eventually be able to travel and go visit once it's all set up and everything will be calmed down.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand you probably need help funding and that kind of support. How can the public help?
The public can help by going on our website, www.whalesanctuary.org, and taking a look at what we're doing and subscribe to our newsletter and tell your friends about it. Tell people about it and share the news of what we're doing. Because we are in the process of building our membership base, our member base, and our base of supporters, our base of followers, and that always helps with fundraising. So yes, we are engaged in fundraising to raise the money to create the sanctuary, and then also the money to care for the animals on a year-by-year basis.
Right, right. Well, that's amazing, and I'll provide links definitely so that people can find you. Thank you so much for talking with us. I really appreciate it. It's so nice to meet you.
Same here.